Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of the Fans Talk Pro Wrestling podcast. My name is Freddy Carlson, and I am once again here with my good friend Angelo. Say hi, Angelo.
Hello.
And today we are here for episode 2 of the podcast. Today's topic will be our own Mount Rushmores of the WWE Mountain. So the guidelines and rules for how we discussed our lists and our possible entries, they had to have been in WWE for at least 1 year. So that is the first qualification. The superstars we discussed had to have spent at least 1 year working under the WWE banner to qualify for the list. Second of all, they have to have had a major impact on the industry of some sort. So we are not going to be considering names who competed in the long forgotten about Brawl for All in the mid-90s or anything like that. And Angelo and I spent several days discussing possible names, and we've narrowed it down to 10 names. We each picked a bunch of names, and we settled on 10 names that we would discuss in detail in this video, and then we would announce towards the end our 4 individual picks for the Mount Rushmore. The Mount Rushmore will consist of 4 male superstars. Today we are doing the male Mount Rushmore. A female Mount Rushmore is a topic for another day. So, without further ado, I will list the 10 names in which we have settled upon, and then Angelo and I will go into depth on why we selected, and now are considering these 10 names for the possibility of being on our own personal Mount Rushmores. So the 10 names in no particular order are the Immortal Hulk Hogan, Stone Cold Steve Austin, the Heartbreak Kid Shawn Michaels, The Game Triple H, Bruno Sammartino, Dwayne The Rock Johnson, Bret the Hitman Hart, John Cena, The Undertaker, and Triple H. I believe...
You mentioned Triple H.
I did. That is my apology, everybody. Oh,
Did we miss Ric Flair?
Ric Flair.
That's the one.
I don't have the names written in a specific list, so bear with me, and I apologize for that mistake. But those are the 10 names in which we have chosen to be involved in the discussion, and so we will now go into depth on each of them individually. So, Angela, who do you think we should go into first out of those 10?
I feel like one that we don't really know much about, and, one that we definitely know the name, but not too much about, like I said, Bruno Sammartino.
All right, so then we're going to start with Bruno Sammartino. So, at least for me, in my consideration of including Bruno Sammartino in this discussion, he was the first true face of the WWE, back when it was still known as the WWF. So, the WWE, in many respects, formed in 1963, all things considered, under Vince Sr., and Bruno Sammartino was the second ever WWE champion. And if I'm correct, I was doing some math, and correct me if I'm wrong, Angelo, but I think his 2 reigns with the WWE Championship, he only held the title twice.
Right.
The cumulative number of days he held the title is more than, I think, John Cena and Triple H combined, which, ironically enough, if you add Cena and Triple H's reigns combined, it's 30 World Championship reigns. And I think if you add all of their days as World Champion together, it is less than the 2 reigns combined of Bruno Sammartino. If my math serves me correct.
Didn't Bruno hold it for like 1,000 days? Something like that?
If I remember correctly, his second reign was around 1,000 days. His first reign, I know for a fact, was over 2,000 days consecutive. So
it was some crazy high number. I do remember about the second reign being over like 1,000 days.
Yeah.
Both reigns were very, very long.
Yeah.
To say the least.
Let's be honest. The first reign, he won the title in *63 and held it into the 70s. So I think he dropped it in 71 or 72. And let's be honest, that will never ever happen again. Nobody will ever eclipse 7 or something years or whatever it was consecutive holding any championship, let alone a world championship. In the modern era of wrestling, championships change hands like there's no tomorrow.
Especially between Charlotte and Banks that happened a few years ago.
Charlotte and Sasha played hot potato with that Raw Women's Championship. And listen, the matches were all pretty good, if not great, but you can't just keep having them switch titles. I mean, Sasha Banks is a 4-time women's champion, and all 4 of her reigns took place in the second half of 2016. But that's a discussion for another day, as we said. Yeah, so I think that Bruno, I mean, he was literally called the living legend until he passed away. And now, yeah, you could say that about just about any wrestler who's been around for a while, but he truly was a living legend. I mean, this is a guy who broke every record there really is to have. He didn't break him; he set him. And now it's just a matter of if anyone will ever get there. I mean, he sold out Madison Square Garden 187 times if you include his Hall of Fame induction. So, you know, that's a man who's done more in this business in just a couple of world title reigns and about a decade or so in the business than anybody else many others have in 30, 40 years since that time.
No, definitely. I mean, like you said, living legend, up until his death. I mean, that really is a true pillar in the industry. Yeah, I can't say it any better than you just did about him.
Yeah, I mean, and so you take Bruno's career and his life and where he started and how he ended up in America as this big face of a company professional wrestler who was literally the face of the WWF at the very, very beginning, taking the title off Buddy Rogers and carrying that company, being the first face. You always talk about the face of the WWE and how there's always going to be, I always view it as there's always going to be one guy and then a select number of guys around him who will build the upper mid card and who will also get their time to shine. Now, Bruno was competing in a time before there really was a quote-unquote upper mid card. There was only the World Championship for that time, and there wasn't as many shows as we see today. But Bruno was the face of the time. And the Bruno stemmed to the face of the next generation, which was Hogan, and then that stemmed to Austin, and so on. And we know how it goes. And the question always is as one legend kind of phases out, who's going to be that next guy? When Stone Cold and The Rock disappeared and left the company to go and pursue other ventures or retired because of injury, who was it going to be? It ended up being John Cena. Now you see Cena kind of fading away and semi-retiring. Who's it going to be? Well, it looks like it's going to be Roman Reigns. So I think that Bruno was the first, and there's only ever going to be one first, the innovator of that kind of a role. So, yeah, Bruno Sammartino. That's at least I can't say much more about him. Obviously, I haven't watched him. We spoke about in episode 1 of the podcast, talking about how our grandfathers and our grandparents in general spoke very highly of Bruno from when they were younger, and I think that it really goes to show how impactful Bruno has been on the wrestling world. How people from so many years ago will still talk about him even to this day. And compare him to the present day superstars, and that's a big difficult thing to do. And Bruno does it. That legend will carry for years to come.
Definitely.
Alrighty, so that is the first name, Bruno Sammartino. And remember, as we go through this list, and I will continue to bring it up, this is not our ranking. This is not us saying that these are guys from 10 to 1 or 1 to 10. Right now, we are just discussing our 10 possible picks. At the end of the 10th person we discuss, we will then reveal our Mount Rushmores, discuss why we eventually went with them, and how the other 6 are honorable mentions with obvious reasons. So the second person we will discuss, I think we should go into, is the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels. He is a 2-time WWE Hall of Famer, and this is just to give you a little backstory on Shawn's resume. Shawn is a 2-time WWE Hall of Famer. He is a 4-time or a 5-time world champion, somewhere in that range. He has won Intercontinental Championships, Tag Team Championships, 2 Royal Rumble matches, including being the runner-up in several other instances. He has main evented 6 WrestleManias, and I mean against the likes of Stone Cold Steve Austin, Bret the Hitman Hart, John Cena, The Undertaker, some of the biggest names in this business. He's main evented WrestleMania against them, and it takes a lot to be able to say he's main evented that many WrestleManias. And obviously Shawn, known very well as one of the founding members of D-Generation X, and was the winner of the first ever Elimination Chamber match, the first ever Hell in a Cell match. Mm-hmm. So there is the resume of Shawn Michaels. Angelo, what reasons do you have for including Shawn in the discussion for the Mount Rushmore?
Pretty much all of what you just talked about, but also I'd say just his character. He's known as the Heartbreak Kid, the sexy boy, whatever, everything. his time in the Rockers. I feel like that's where his career really took off because, much like someone else on our list, Bret Hart, he was paired with someone in Mario Jannetty who had a little bit more experience than he did.
Oh yeah.
And just starting from a tag team career and going into being one of the greatest wrestlers at the time, and I believe he still is in history, one of the greatest WWE wrestlers. I feel like he paved the way in for like heel characters.
Oh,
If you want to say,
without a doubt, in my eyes, Sean is the definition of the earliest heel. He is what people need to aspire to be. And Angela, you were talking right now. You were talking about how Sean kind of started a tag team and eventually moved into the mid card and then eventually the world title picture. Back in the day, that's kind of how they did it. That was really how it was. For a lot of guys moving up the card, they would start in tag teams a lot. They would move into the mid card and they would eventually move up to the main event scene. You saw it with Michaels, you saw it with Hart, you saw it with a handful of guys. Diesel too, Kevin Nash. In the first, I think, 2 years of his time, he had won all 3 championships the WWE had to offer, and so it ended up becoming a really big thing.
tradition.
Tradition, yeah. And Sean, I wouldn't say he was the last of those guys because other guys ended up doing it in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, but what I did notice with Sean was that it was different. Sean had this attitude about him, this swag that nobody before him had had. He was a smaller guy, so he wasn't one of these big muscular guys who are going to be on the cover of Muscle and Fitness with 24-inch pythons or, catchphrases, that you can recite in a promo. But he was just the definition of a bad guy that you loved to hate, but the women loved him. They loved to, and that was what you wanted. He was a bad guy that the guys envied but hated, the girls hated but adored because he looked good. And, he was on top of that card for as long as he was because of how good he was. And I don't think there are many guys who can retire because of a back injury only to return 4 years later and have an 8-year run after the first retirement. He came back in 2002 and was as good, if not better, than he was when he retired in 98. And he was in a better place in his life, so that made his in-ring work and his on-screen persona even better because he had more desire to work towards it, and he wasn't gonna, be the notorious difficulty that he was backstage, save for the stuff with Hogan at SummerSlam 05. That he had the reputation he had garnered in the 90s. So Sean, maybe not the most championship adorned resume that you'll ever see, but
right.
In many ways Sean didn't need that resume. I mean that type of resume. Sean just needed to be on the card and in the ring, and he will show you why he was as good as he was.
No, definitely. I mean that holding championships. I feel like even if you don't hold a world championship, I feel like it's more of the mark that you leave behind for the future generations.
Absolutely.
Like take someone like Mr. Perfect, for example. Never won a world championship, but was an intercontinental title, and his athleticism and his charisma, I feel like really paved the way for a bunch of other wrestlers that came after him.
Oh, absolutely. And I heard, and where this fact is coming from. One of our friends said to me once, and I really took this to heart. John Cena's a 16-time world champion. Take nothing away from him for what he did, and we're going to get into him in a little bit. But he won the title 16 times, yeah. But you also know what he did? He lost it 16 times.
Yeah.
And so that's why you can't let championships be the true definition of a superstar. You have to have more to you than just that. And so that's why I think Sean does that. He goes beyond that in many respects.
Definitely.
Since we mentioned him, we might as well move into John Cena. So, some more backstory on John Cena. He is a 16-time world champion, tied for the most all-time with the Nature Boy Ric Flair. He is also a 5-time United States champion, a 3-time tag team champion. He has main events at WrestleMania on 7 different occasions, if I'm not mistaken.
I think that's right. Yeah.
He's twice against The Rock, once against Shawn Michaels, Triple H, there was but besides that, so that's 4 main events right there.
Mm-hmm.
But he also competed in WrestleMania matches against Batista, he main evented with The Miz in 27, so
Yep.
5 main events. He also faced Batista and JBL and The Big Show and Randy Orton at WrestleMania, and Edge. And he's The Undertaker. He's involved in The Undertaker's illustrious record at WrestleMania. And that's what makes Cena, in my eyes, being able to compete at the grandest stage of them all in so many huge matches. That's number one. Plus the 16 World Championships. As I said before, take nothing away from it. I mentioned that, yes, he won it 16 times, but he also lost it 16 times. That is still a record. That is still a high praise. He's won 2 Royal Rumble matches. He's won the Money in the Bank ladder match. So he's pretty much won almost everything there is to win outside of the Intercontinental Championship.
Yep.
And, as we mentioned before when talking about Bruno Sammartino, he was one of those guys who was considered the face of his era. The ruthless aggression into the PG era was defined by the rise of John Cena as not only one of the top guys, but he was the top guy. We mentioned before, and then I'll let you get into your reasonings for Cena. We mentioned how after Sammartino's era, pretty much every era after that had a number one guy with its list of a handful of guys directly below him who always would be around there to help keep the championship picture satisfied, and that upper mid-card and that world title picture was always solid. Guys like Orton and Batista and Edge, guys who would always be there underneath Cena. And so
Definitely.
Cena had a solid core of guys to work with that helped make Cena look even better. So, Angelo, what is some of your reasonings for putting Cena in this discussion?
Well, obviously for all the same reasons like you said, but also one thing that's common now is the way that new stars are, I guess you would say, put over.
Yep.
John Cena's been known to put certain stars over. I mean, what was the SummerSlam where he lost the United States title to Seth Rollins? He honestly, I didn't think that Rollins was going to be holding 2 belts at once at that point. I mean, I kind of saw it happening, but I was like, nah, they're not going to book it. And of course, Cena put him over. Same way Cena put over many other stars before Rollins, and even he put over Roman Reigns after Rollins.
So that's the thing too with Cena. Listen, in his time when he was a full-time competitor, there was that mythical golden shovel, as we all know about, that really made Cena this guy that everybody was gonna hate, and he buried people, and he did. I'm not gonna lie, there was definitely some of that in his time, but in the more recent years, he has really become a guy who's going to put over younger talent, who's going to be around to be on screen every week. Guys like Seth Rollins and Kevin Owens and AJ Styles and Roman Reigns, and that's what you need in this. And Bray Wyatt, the Fiend, in the Firefly Funhouse match at WrestleMania, an unbelievable, unique but fun but weird match. And I know we're going to try and get into that as a whole topic in and of itself in another episode down the line, but He's doing the right thing now and putting these guys over while not hurting his legacy. I hate to say it, but a guy like Goldberg comes back and he's going to try and put guys over, and he's only hurting his own legacy because he's making himself look bad. He is not as good in that ring as he once was. And so he's making himself look bad, which hurts his legacy by just trying to still be lingering around. And Cena's not doing that. He's there. He still looks as good as he ever was. He is still John Cena. He can still go in the ring if he needed to. But he's doing the right thing and putting guys over and using what level of stardom he has to help build new stars.
Definitely, and I feel like that's what it comes down to, especially nowadays. I feel like that's how stars are made, when they have that one, breakout match.
Yep. And you cannot continue to rely on part-timers and legends and Hall of Famers to continue to come back and be your main event. Because 20 years from now, The Undertaker, Goldberg, Brock Lesnar, they're not going to be able to come back and carry a main event program for weeks and months trying to build it up to WrestleMania or a Saudi show or wherever. They're just not going to be able to do it because they're going to be too old to be able to compete in that ring. And so you need new stars who can be in that ring and in those moments, but also beyond that can also be your new legends to come back. And I don't want to be having Royal Rumbles in 15, 20 years and have legends coming back being, Adam Rose. Like, I don't need that. Adam Rose is a guy that I'd care to forget about, all things considered. He had one fun gimmick that died out quicker than his career got started. So, yeah, but that's off topic. So I understand what you mean, Angelo. And I think everyone always regards Cena as one of the most polarizing figures as well in the history of WWE, and so that definitely he made the crowd react, whether it was a cheer or a boo. He did his job, and he got the crowd to be interactive with the show, and that's what you're supposed to do as a WWE superstar. And yeah, so John Cena. All right, so we've discussed Bruno Sammartino, we've discussed Shawn Michaels, and we've discussed John Cena. So moving into our fourth man on the list, we'll move into a man who is very well known to be involved with groups of four, the Nature Boy, Ric Flair. Ric Flair. His resume is a little bit harder to quote, so I'm going to just give the Cliff Notes version. 16-time world champion. He's won a Royal Rumble match. He competed for well over 35 years as an active in-ring competitor in companies all over the world, territories and promotions in the era that gone by when that was still a thing. Then NWA, WCW, and WWE. He even had a small run in TNA. Not the best time. I'm not gonna lie, some really rough matches after his in-ring career was supposed to come to an end. But Ric Flair is, a member of the Four Horsemen, a member of Evolution, and has been involved in some of the more well-known moments in history. The "I'm sorry, I love you" moment at WrestleMania 24, his retirement match with Shawn Michaels.
Yep.
And I think just his give me your opinion on this, Angelo. I think his status as just being around for so long and being so popular and so well known, whether it was as a babyface or more often than not as a dastardly heel when he was the world champ all those times. And they credit him as a 16-time champion, but rumors are very solid, and he's even come out and said it's more than that, but they only credit 16. But nonetheless, give me your input on Ric Flair, Angelo. I know that you actually, in episode 1 of our podcast, ranked Ric Flair as your number one superstar of all time. So I know that you have very strong opinions and feelings regarding Flair. So what do you got?
Yes. So definitely, other than all this stuff, once again, like how you mentioned, a lot of this is going to be me agreeing with you because I feel like me and you have that, mental connection.
Mm-hmm.
But, if you think about something, like legendary status, one name that comes to mind for me, other than Sammartino or Hogan or Cena, is definitely Ric Flair. I mean, you see him in the media a lot. Ric Flair drip. You see people, doing the woo. You see people carrying the big old belts, wearing the robe. I mean, you have the robe too, so that just shows the impact that he has.
Yeah, he is somehow at his age permeated the social construct of America in 2020. That some current superstars who are active can't do. And that's saying something when a 70-something-year-old man can do that.
No, and one thing that was really funny is, when I was in high school, there was this kid that was, I don't want to say, like, bullied, but, like, he would get made fun of because he was a wrestling fan. And, in my school, if you're a wrestling fan, it's something that you get made fun of about for whatever reason.
Yeah, I've been
I mean, I'm pretty sure you can agree with it, too.
I've been there, yeah, I know.
He was literally getting, like, one class, I think it was our math class, and we had a really chill teacher. And the teacher was kind of a wrestling fan, too, oddly enough. And this kid was throwing, like, paper balls at my friend. And my friend just gets up in the middle of the class and goes, "If you don't stop it, I will, flare chop you as hard as I can, then lock you in the figure 4. And my teacher literally stood up and said, "Okay, that's the greatest promo I've ever seen. Now sit back down."
Yeah. Nah, Flair, his reach as a legend and his star power is so much different now than what you've ever seen in the past. And I think that's what's so good about Rick is that he and he's humbled now. I know I watched his Stone Cold Broken Skull Sessions interview with Stone Cold that they just released on the network recently. He's humbled a lot more now than he was in his younger years, and he knows he's been blessed and he's lucky, and he's called the greatest of all time by his peers. All the other superstars acknowledge him as the GOAT, and he broke down into tears when Stone Cold Steve Austin said a list of names of people who consider him the GOAT, and how he felt so honored and humbled that people he considers his peers and his friends think so highly of him. And I just think Rick is, he's done it for so long. He did it so well, and there's no one ever gonna be like Ric Flair ever again. You know?
No, exactly. I definitely highly agree with you on that point. And the fact that you just said, he broke down in tears during that interview, that really says something about, him as not only as a character but as a person.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
definitely the way that I guess his peers would react to him like that. I mean, that just shows the respect that not only he deserves, but I think that he wouldn't expect.
Right. I think him and a lot of guys in the business will always say, you don't do it for the respect, you don't do it for the admiration. They do it because they love the business, and they do it because they want to entertain the fans. And
exactly.
And I think Rick is one of the biggest proponents of that. And I've always loved superstars who treat that concept so highly. And I think just about all the names on the list that we are going to discuss are in that same thought process. So moving on to our 5th of 10, we will discuss the 14-time world champion, The Game, Triple H. So,
yes.
Resume statistics on Triple H. Triple H, a 14-time world champion. He's also a 5-time Intercontinental Champion. He's won the Tag Team Championship multiple times. He's also been the European Champion, 2 Royal Rumble match victories. He's headlined countless WrestleManias. Fun fact about Triple H, he's actually competed at the second most total WrestleManias in his career. I think 2 of them, two appearances behind The Undertaker. So,
wow.
Triple H, lots of WrestleMania matches, big moments in the WWE. I do have to say, for me personally, the Reign of Terror pulls him down a little bit. The Reign of Terror, for those who don't know, was from mid to late 2002 up until early 2005. He kind of ran roughshod on Raw, almost taking the world title hostage and winning it from all the guys who deserved it and should have held it longer. And it's a discussion to be had for another day. But so that brings him back a little bit in my mind. He's still one of the greatest. The Reign of Terror, though, has its low points to the point where it probably keeps him a little lower in my thought process when it comes to picking 4. Give me your thoughts on that, Angelo.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, I feel like that brought his character down. But back to the whole, getting started and, whatever. He was basically, what was it? I don't want to say jobber, but, he came into the WWF as, this...
The Blue Blood.
As the Blue Blood, yeah. And, eventually he sided with Shawn Michaels to form DX. And I feel like that's where he finally became Triple H, much like Shawn Michaels with Mario Jannetty. Now Michaels is passing it down to Triple H, and then Triple H can pass it down as he did in Evolution with Batista and Randy Orton.
And again, in the Authority, I gotta say it with Seth Rollins.
That was a phenomenal thing.
Much later on, but yeah, I agree with you on that respect. It took Triple H a little while to really get his footing, and I know that he was hurt by the curtain call controversy that took place at Madison Square Garden. He was the one who took the brunt of the punishment for what happened that night. So that definitely didn't help him in regards to certain things. But getting involved with Shawn and starting DX, really creating a character outside of just an aristocrat blue blood who comes to the ring with this weird music playing. Hunter Hearst Helmsley became Triple H.
Yes.
And I think the biggest turning point in his career was when Shawn Michaels left after WrestleMania 14. Triple H was now the leader of DX.
Mm-hmm.
He's now one of the top heels on Raw. Stone Cold Steve Austin eventually ends up getting hurt, has to leave for a few months to have neck surgery. Triple H ascends to that top heel persona to feud with The Rock. And that feud, first with Cactus Jack and then into his feud with The Rock, were the 2 defining feuds of his career that made him a bona fide star. Because feuding with Foley and Rock made Triple H a bigger name because of what they did in those matches.
Definitely.
Yeah, and then think about it. All the brutal street fight at Royal Rumble 2000 with Cactus Jack, and then the Hell in a Cell match at No Way Out a month later. He was the first heel to win the main event of WrestleMania. He was for the first time in 16 years of WrestleMania 2000, WrestleMania 16, he won the main event as a heel. It had never happened in 15 years of WrestleMania before that. The babyface always went over in the main event and sent the crowd home happy. But that night, the heel set up a new precedent that a heel could win in the main event, and that could actually happen. And it's happened many a time since then, and done well or not is a different story. But setting precedent in that respect as well. And Angelo, I think you can say a lot about this.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, I know it doesn't count to his in-ring career, but if you're talking about the contribution to the business as a whole, being part of the part of the discussion for why they should be included, what he's doing with NXT, I mean,
without a doubt, I agree with you 100%.
You are a huge. I mean, as am I, but you are a diehard NXT guy.
Definitely now more than ever. Him taking people like Kevin Owens, Samoa Joe, Seth Rollins, now Adam Cole.
Baby.
Oh, he's working wonders for the company.
Mm-hmm. He's finding the gems that need to come into the WWE and that they can shape into being your stars of the future. If Vince, I hate to be the one to point it out, if Vince will allow it. He's done it with Owens. Exactly. He's done it with Rollins. He's let them be big name guys on Raw and SmackDown. I do hope for similar things to come for Adam Cole and Johnny Gargano, and I know Tommaso Ciampa doesn't really want to move up to the main roster because his body can't take that kind of schedule, but I just think that in general, Triple H's contributions now, everything that he lost during the Reign of Terror and the Katie Vick days, he has definitely redeemed almost all, if not entirely, through his work with NXT.
Yep. And I mean, even on the huge point with NXT, like you just said with Tommaso Ciampa, how he doesn't want to go up. I read on Instagram recently, I forgot what page it was, but someone asked him, would you ever consider going up to the main roster if they offered it to you? And he said, well, I have NXT, for life on my t-shirt. He goes, that's something that definitely stays with me, is I would just rather stay in NXT right now.
And for the first time ever, that's a legit possibility with NXT being its own third brand for the company and on USA every week. That is what makes that a legit possibility. And you know what? So long as it keeps things stay fresh, I wouldn't have a problem with it. Absolutely no problem with it.
Not at all.
So, yeah, Triple H has impacted the business in many ways over his 25 years in the business. Can't believe it's been 25 years, but that's the game, the King of Kings, the cerebral assassin, Triple H. On to our next discussion regarding WWE Hall of Famer Bret the Hitman Hart. So, regarding his career highlights and resume, he is a two-time Hall of Famer, as is Shawn Michaels and Ric Flair. He is a 5-time WWE champion. He's also held the WCW championship, multiple-time Intercontinental champion and tag team champion. He was similar to Shawn Michaels in the respect that he went from the tag division to the mid-card with the IC belt and then eventually to the main event with the WWE title in the course of a few years, as we said was kind of the norm back then. He also co-won a Royal Rumble, the only time there were two winners of a single Royal Rumble match with Lex Luger in '94. He's main evented WrestleManias against Yokozuna, against Shawn Michaels, and we all know the infamous Montreal Screwjob.
Yes.
So, what qualities about Hart make you feel like he belongs in this discussion, and then what do you believe might be hindrances for him? Because I know I have a couple.
So the qualification's pretty much the same as you once again. But I feel like since he was in that infamous Montreal Screwjob, which was a phenomenal match, I think personally, until the very end.
Yeah.
That was one of them, and then his I totally forgot what I was gonna say.
I think were you going toward what ended up happening in WCW with Goldberg?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, part of my hindrance with him is he didn't have as long of a career as some of these other guys. I mean, he was in the WWE for about 10 years. Figure he came in the late 80s as a part of the Hart Foundation. And 97, the Montreal Screwjob, he was gone. Was in WCW for a little bit, cup of coffee. That was not much of anything. And then he had the career-ending injury that happened at the hands of Goldberg. And not his fault. Goldberg kicked him in the side of the head. He got a concussion that ended his career.
Botched super kick.
Yeah. Many a reason why I have issues with Goldberg, but again, not going to discuss that here. Brett, great in-ring worker. It's hard to find a match that wasn't good. I don't really have too many memories of the Montreal Screwjob match outside of what ended up happening. So you said that you thought it was a really good match. I mean, have you seen it recently, or have you watched it from start to finish? Because I don't believe I actually have. I think I've only seen the ending clips of what happened with the Screwjob.
No, I've seen like a little bit. Like it was just from like what I've heard and the little parts that I've seen.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
I never saw the match in its entirety. I mean, I would love to just to get more of a grasp on it.
Yeah.
But I feel like because it was something that definitely, I don't want to say highlighted his career, but it's something that he was part of in history, which was more than a storyline. How he got truly screwed over by Vince.
Yeah, it was a whole thing. And imagine being a fan. I mean, we weren't born at the time, but can you imagine at the time being a fan and not knowing what was happening here? For the first real time ever, kayfabe was broken and reality was blurred as much as it was.
Yep. I mean, losing to your own finishing move, like how does that happen? And you didn't even tap. So
yeah, there's a lot to be discussed in regards to the Montreal Screwjob. But when it comes to Brett, I just think that if he had a little bit longer of a career, if he was able to find a way to get back involved or something, I just feel like that would have been a little bit better for him in my ranking of him. I love Brett. His matches are always great. I mean, his match with Stone Cold Steve Austin, WrestleMania 13, the double turn, his best match in my opinion that night. That match.
Yeah, I have to go back and check that one out again.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen it, but I do remember watching it a few years ago and being like, wow. I mean, hearing all the high praise I had heard about it and then actually watching it myself, and it actually lived up to it in all of its hype. So, definitely big for him. And so that is Bret the Hitman Hart, and he was the 6th of 10 individuals that we will be discussing. Moving on to number 7, and again, in no particular order, just as a reminder, we are doing this solely to discuss 10 stars and then just give some ranking on them towards the end. The next one we will discuss is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. And I will give his career highlights, and then I will actually kind of go into my own personal reason for why I think that there's a slight issue with The Rock. So The Rock, he won the 2000 Royal Rumble match. He's main evented countless WrestleManias against the likes of Austin and all those matches with Austin, all 3, the WrestleMania trilogy.
Yeah.
But also Triple H, John Cena. He is an 8-time WWE champion. He's also held the WCW championship twice, which I believe WWE counts to make him a 10-time champion. He is a 2-time Intercontinental champion, a 5-time tag team champion, and he won the Deadly Games tournament in 1998 to crown a new champion after the title was vacated at Survivor Series. So my biggest hindrance with Rock, in the same vein as Brett, not enough longevity in the business. That's my biggest hindrance to him. As big of a star as he was, as big of a name as he ended up becoming, even before he went to Hollywood, not enough time in the business for me to really warrant being the best of all time. Right. Yeah. So what's your take on his early exit from the WWE and moving to Hollywood?
I mean, obviously you wanna put your name out there, you wanna put your brand out. You wanna follow where the money is, but at the same time, I feel like he left at a time where he truly was needed. He was up there with Austin, and then both of them were gone at the same time. That kind of left the business, at risk.
Yeah.
Personally, I feel. I mean, I don't know if you agree with me 100% on that, but
I have the mindset of, he put over Brock Lesnar, and it looked like Rock was going to phase out into a part-timer. Fine, fair enough. Brock looks like your guy. Austin comes back and then retires because he couldn't go anymore in the ring. His injuries were too much and whatnot. And Brock and Goldberg up and leave after Mania 20. The Rock's last match before taking a 7-year hiatus was at WrestleMania 20. So the night WrestleMania 20 ends, by the time WrestleMania 20 ends, you've got one of your all-time greats has retired. You've got another one who's now gone off to Hollywood for good for at least the next 7 years, and we didn't know when he was going to really come back. Brock is gone. He was supposed to be your next guy. Goldberg's gone. He was supposed to come in and be a big name. You've got Triple H in the midst of his reign of terror on Monday Night Raw, and that's where the whole Ruthless Aggression era had to kick in. And don't think of this as digs to The Rock. I love The Rock. His match with Stone Cold Steve Austin at WrestleMania 17 is it's one of my 2 favorite matches of all time. I actually just rewatched it last week, and I tell you, I can never watch that match and hate it. And Rock on the microphone, the best on the microphone. You can't disagree, can you?
No, not at all.
Yeah, I mean,
he's like up there with the mic skills.
Yeah, I mean he's just unparalleled on that mic. So few guys can be as good as he is when it comes to talking, and that's what makes his mic skills the best, and that's a big thing for me. But I just think it was the longevity, and then he came back and he had the stuff with Cena and Punk, and good. Maybe the first Cena match was really good. The second one, once in a lifetime, best out of 2, kind of a thing.
Right.
Nah, whatever. So, yeah. That's kind of how I stand on The Rock. Love him. Definitely involved in this discussion for sure, but not the pinnacle of it all. And I think that ends up being a thing we both take into account when we make our actual Mount Rushmores a little later on. So next up, we will be discussing our 7th individual, I believe. Yes.
Yes.
We will be getting into the immortal Hulk Hogan. So Hogan was the face of the company at a time that was very important. And the contributions he made as the face of the company in that 7-8 year span will be the most important time in wrestling history. From WrestleMania, the main eventing the first 7 out of the first 8 WrestleManias. Yeah, everyone but WrestleMania 4, he main evented, and being the champion for as long as he was, 5 times, 6 times, 7 times, whatever it was. He was the first 3-time champion, the first 4-time champion, the first 5-time champion. He also had a tag title reign much later. And also it needs to be included is the fact that he also won 2 Royal Rumble matches in 90 and 91. Often forgotten about, I think, that he won 2 Royal Rumble matches out of all the things he did. But yeah, I mean, when it comes to the Hogan's time from 84 when he won the title for the first time to 93 when he won the title for the last time and then left for WCW a few months later, outside of maybe a few bad politics decisions backstage trying to get keep himself in the main event, you can't really say much bad about Hogan and how much he did for the business, can you?
No, honestly, no. For me, no. I mean, there are people that would disagree, but at the same time, he's pretty much, I feel like, done it all.
Absolutely. I mean, he's gonna get inducted into the Hall of Fame this year for the 2nd time. He went in on his own. Now he's gonna be going in as a part of the NWO. Should the 2020 induction ceremony be able to take place this year, obviously with everything going on, but I think and another one that we forget, his match with The Rock at WrestleMania 18.
Yes, that was a phenomenal match. That one I watched to its entirety.
Yes, I have as well. It has been a little while, so I might want to go back and refresh my memory. But, man, that crowd in Toronto, I've never seen a hotter crowd for any match. Like, completely coming unglued when he hulked up. Like,
oh, yeah.
Wow. That moment, that whole thing. Yeah. He was... Yeah. I don't think there's much more that you could say regarding Hulk Hogan. Other than,
at all. I mean,
literally immortal.
Yeah. I mean, please forgive me for the bad pun, but, that moment when he hulked up was truly electrifying.
I see what you did there. Taking the riff off of his opponent.
Yes.
All right, so we've got two names left to discuss before we end up revealing our Mount Rushmores. The first of the two will be the legendary phenom, the Dead Man, the Undertaker. Undertaker, I believe, is the greatest overall in-ring performer of all time, from top to bottom. Most specifically with character work, but also when you discuss the in-ring ability that he possesses, and more so possessed, but he's still got something left to give. If he, as much as I would just like for him to have a big retirement feud and call it a career before he really starts doing what Goldberg's doing and hurting his legacy. He's, when you look at Undertaker's resume, and it's definitely padded. He's only a 7-time world champion. For a guy who's been in the WWE for 30 years this coming November, he has only won the title 7 times. I mean, right. Cena's been in the company just under 20 years, and he's already got 16. So the comparison, you can take it as you wish. But Taker was never a guy who needed the title. How many times was he involved in probably the biggest storyline going, and he wasn't in need of a championship? His whole thing with Shawn Michaels and Triple H from WrestleManias 25 to 28, there was no titles involved. It was the streak, and it was their careers in many respects, and their era coming to an end. Taker's also won a Royal Rumble match. He's main evented WrestleMania several times against Psycho Sid. Often forgotten about that he main evented WrestleMania 13 against Psycho Sid. That match went on after Austin and Hart. Now, any match could try and go on after Austin and Hart that night. I'll have no idea. And he's all against the stuff with Michaels and Triple H and CM Punk in 2013. And I might be in the minority, but I really enjoyed his stuff with Brock Lesnar in 2015. Not the streak break, not the ending of the streak, but the 2015 rematches at SummerSlam and Hell in a Cell. I was a big fan of those. So yeah, at the end of the day, that's what I had to say about The Undertaker. What more can you add, Angelo? Anything indelible?
Well, I mean, after I think one thing that really made me put him on here was after Cena's debut match against Kurt Angle, he was in the back, and to see Undertaker in his badass, American badass gimmick, and literally taking off his sunglasses, putting his hand on, and saying, "Great job in the ring, kid." That really, that really blew my mind.
That's endorsement from the biggest name you've got to offer. And I always, and another thing that is, it's not major, but I was also rewatching some stuff from the Invasion storyline recently, and and I was seeing how Taker really was the guy. I mean, yeah, you had Austin and Rock were kind of the captains of the two sides. It was Vince against Shane and Stephanie and Paul Heyman, but Taker was rallying the troops. He got a promo involved in there where he said, "I've been here 10 years, and I don't want to go anywhere yet. I ain't done here." Like, he really took that role as locker room leader on screen and I know for a fact that he did backstage as well. And I just think that those things mean a lot in my book when you're talking about a guy who's trying to be the face, not the face of your company. I mean, he was never really the only face of the company. As we said, the World Championship, while he was champion 7 times, he wasn't always, the face of the company. Right. It was always the Hogans, the Austins, the Rocks, the Cenas, the Harts, the Michaels. Today with Reigns and Rollins, it's amazing, and yet he can still come back today. And at WrestleMania 36 in 2020, the 30th year he's been in the WWE, you know what match was talked about the most out of the entire show? Albeit it was a weird and unique show. What match was talked about the most? Was it a match involving Seth Rollins? No. Was it a match involving Kevin Owens? No. Was it a match involving The Fiend? Sort of. But in many ways, it was the match with The Undertaker. In 2020 was the most talked about match from WrestleMania. And that speaks volumes when in 1990 he's debuting and everyone's talking about this big, weird, unknown, dominant monster who's standing in the ring and he's no-selling everybody. And now in 2020, he's having the most over match on the biggest show of the year. And it's also the most unique match WWE arguably has ever put out that was good.
Yep.
They've done some stuff and it was weird, and he's been involved in boiler room brawls and buried alive matches, but I don't think you can say much more about The Undertaker.
No, not at all. I mean, that man, the Boneyard match, that was one hell of a match. I mean, especially against AJ Styles.
Yeah. Way to elevate
AJ's running up. He's got some mileage on his tank too, but Undertaker definitely, for him to still go at a good pace and bring back one of his 3 gimmicks as the American Badass, like, that's something that I think fans have been waiting to see return. And now that he did it at 36, hopefully next year, WrestleMania 37, personally, I want to see him have the one match against John Cena. Just all time, that's it.
Yeah, I love Taker. I don't know how many more times he can go out there without hurting himself, both physically and legacy-wise. I'm worried about him. I love him. He was my number 1 superstar of all time on our top 50 list from the first episode of the podcast, but I'm just worried that he's going to put himself in a place that he shouldn't be because of his health and because of his abilities in that ring. He might try and go too far. So I'm just worried about him. But there's little bad you could say about The Undertaker.
Mm-hmm. Very little bad.
And so that brings us to discuss our final superstar out of the 10 that we have laid out. And after which we will move into our discussion of our personal Mount Rushmores, and then we will begin to wrap it up. And that last superstar that we need to discuss is the WWE Hall of Famer, the Texas Rattlesnake, and the toughest SOB in the history of the WWE, Stone Cold Steve Austin. Vince McMahon, in Austin's 2009 Hall of Fame induction, said he is, without a doubt, the greatest WWE superstar of all time. And I could not agree more. I know I ranked Undertaker number 1 on my list and Austin number 2. But you know something? When it comes down to it, Austin was the biggest character, the biggest superstar, the biggest name, the biggest draw, the biggest everything from 1997 to 2003.
Yep.
May have only been 7 years, and I know we spoke a lot about longevity in this episode, but he is the rare exception where in only 6-7 years, probably the shortest amount of time at the top as of any guy we've discussed on this list, he became the biggest name ever. To the point now where whenever Austin comes back, it is a marquee moment.
Definitely. I mean, we could be watching from home, and I don't know if you do. I bet you do. But definitely hearing that shattering glass. I mark out what the hell yeah. I put up the middle fingers.
I jump out of my seat.
It's like one of those, definitely heart-to-heart moments.
Unbelievable that we're able to witness. I mean, we're witnessing just him come out for promos or for little segments, but every time you hear that glass shatter, you know it's going to be something good, because Austin does not disappoint, even at this stage of his life and of his career. And, surprisingly enough, completely unrelated to discussing the business, he's a surprisingly good interviewer with his podcast and his Broken Skull sessions and all that.
Yeah.
It's great. But, yeah. There's very little. I don't think there's any bad you could say about Austin, save for maybe the time he took his ball and went home. He's always been great. From the first time he cut the Austin 316 promo to all the hell yeahs, the stunners, the beer, the moments, the championships. He's the only person to win 3 Royal Rumble matches. He main evented.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah.
1997, 98, and 2001. He main evented WrestleMania twice against The Rock. He also did it against Stone Cold. He also did it against Shawn Michaels. So again, probably the least amount of time at the top of the card as any guy we've had on the list that we've discussed, but arguably the best out of them all because of what he did in the time, and the Attitude Era we all know was the most important time in professional wrestling history. We talked about Hogan's being the most important. I think Hogan's was very important, and it was the most important in the sense of creating the business. But in terms of staying alive, the Attitude Era and what they did and what Austin did made that era the best. And what saved the WWE from probably going out of business and losing to WCW if they didn't change up their content. WCW, despite their flaws, would have won because they wouldn't have had the pressure from WWE to keep getting better, and then ended up having their issues and do what they ended up doing. So who knows what could have happened without Austin. So those are the 10 names that Angelo and I spent many an hour thinking about. I know that it took me a little while. I had other names who I considered to be involved in the discussion. Angelo, I know you did too, correct?
Yeah. But at the end of the day, this is the list that we chose. I feel like those names would be great to put on a different. I don't know if we would even say Mount Rushmore. I mean, we could probably do one Mount Rushmore of generation. I feel like that would be a fun topic for a later episode.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. But for right now, we're going to reveal our Mount Rushmores of the WWE. So I'll reveal mine first. Angela, you can reveal yours after, and then I'll let you go into why you selected your 4 first. So,
Definitely.
Out of the 10 names we discussed, the 4 that I would put on my Mount Rushmore of the WWE are as follows. The Immortal Hulk Hogan, The Undertaker, John Cena, and Stone Cold Steve Austin. Those are my 4 on the Mount Rushmore. Angelo, who is your 4?
My 4 in this order are John Cena, the Phenom The Undertaker, the Nature Boy Ric Flair,
Woo!
and I had to put him up there as my 4th. The Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels.
All right. So what made you put these 4 above the other 6?
Definitely, John Cena is number 1 because, definitely his world title reigns. Again, I'm going to mention work ethic here as I did last episode for a lot of people, but, he's one of those where he literally, he lives in the gym. He cares about training and everything. He tries adding new moves to his arsenal. All of his great feuds. One of the best feuds I think that I have to say for him is against CM Punk. Arguably.
There's so
but
many.
Also the ruthless aggression Cena. That's what really
The
put him in my list.
Thugonomics. We'll put him on the map back in the day.
Oh yeah, basic thugonomics, baby.
All right. So that's Cena. Any other specific reasons for Flair, Taker, or Michaels?
Well, for Taker, all the points that you just talked about and that we discussed. Definitely, longevity. Just like you said, world title reigns don't matter. I definitely agree with that. Taker is great, with his characters. And much like AJ Styles and anybody else, he can make magic work in the ring pretty much with anybody. It doesn't matter.
He can wrestle the old saying, he can wrestle a broomstick and have a 5-star match.
Oh, definitely. Ric Flair, I'd say because of his character, again, work ethic, and longevity as well, but also, getting the respect from his peers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I all those points fantastic. I really can't say much otherwise. We both have Cena and Taker on our Mount Rushmores, and I think the points stand Taker and the amount of time he's been there, the amount of things he's done, and how he was able to adapt with the times no matter what happened in his life and his career in the company in the world, always adapting with the times. And Cena, his legendary feuds with the likes of Randy Orton and CM Punk and Edge, Triple H and Shawn Michaels and Batista. I can go on and on here. And the matches. He gave more great AJ Styles too. The matches that he gave that were so good. Above and beyond in almost every aspect. The reason that I put Austin and Hogan over Flair and Michaels. More so, they were the defining, as I said, they were the defining stars of the 2 most important periods in wrestling history. The early days of WrestleMania, when the WWE was taking the biggest gamble ever and trying to become the biggest company in the world, little by little, and Hogan being the face of that. And as I said, I don't think I could give anyone more praise than I gave Stone Cold Steve Austin a couple minutes ago. Those 4 for me by far kind of eclipse the other 6. Nothing against the 6 other men that we discussed and that I didn't choose to put on mine. I just think that at the end of the day, these 4 just get that little bit of an edge, no pun intended on edge, over the rest. Is there anything else that you'd like to add before we start to wrap things up?
I think, you and I have actually spoken about everything that, needed to be discussed.
Right. No, absolutely. So at this time, we're gonna thank you for tuning in and for joining us for this episode of the Fans Talk Pro Wrestling Podcast, episode 2, our personal Mount Rushmores of the WWE. We hope that you will like, share, and subscribe this video, and tune in next time as we discuss another fantastic wrestling topic. Thank you, and have a wonderful rest of your day.